of the world. It's Friday, we're live. Welcome to Thinking on Paper. And you're probably not going to learn anything in as much depth as you are today. I certainly didn't. We're talking about the electric stack, lithium-ion batteries, magnets and electric motors, power electronics, and embedded compute, and how they all fit together to fuel the world. If it can go electric, it's going to go electric. And the electric stack is the foundation of that. And unsurprisingly, China is dominating this market. America isn't even playing catch up. It's not in the game anymore. America has taken a very different gamble to the Chinese. And it's all about the electric stack. We are unpacking Packy McCormick's not boring essay on this. It's called The Electric Slide. It's very long. It's very deep. It goes into the history, the politics, the use case, the alpha products of the electric stack by stack, point by point. It's incredible. We're going to try and learn in public, aren't we, Jeremy, as we go?
Thinking on paper, learning in public. That's what these live sessions are. Happy Friday, everybody. This is our second essay from Packy McCormick that we're breaking down. The first one was Most Human Wins, related to how to survive in the AI age. Link below if you want to check that one out. But let's start kind of from a high level, and then what we're going to do over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we're really going to try to get into batteries, the history of batteries, why we should care about the history of batteries, and what the battery market has been doing over the last, 5 to 10 years. And then we're going to do the same thing with magnets, and why do we care, and as it fits in this whole stack.
Spoiler alert, the price has dropped by about 99% for both of those in the creation of both magnets and batteries. Hence the essay.
So here's where I kind of, my head was kind of going to start this whole thing is, many of us really don't understand, ourselves included, up until reading this essay, don't really understand the pieces that power the world, really, and the inventions that are going to be the key ingredients to the future. And really, this stack that we're talking about involves all of those pieces and parts. And according to Packy's essay here, there are 4 parts to this electric stack, and China, like you said, spoiler alert, owns about 3.5 pieces of that stack. So why are we exploring this? So AI is a big topic here, and I think there's a relatable thread to China's approach to AI and the U.S. approach to AI, and it goes back to the old narrative of the U.S. is good at coming up with things, ideas, entrepreneurship, creativity, and China's just known for cheap manufacturing, right? And we know now that that's a very old narrative, and especially today, it's a really old narrative. And there's an interesting piece to how both of those countries are approaching AI in general. China is approaching it from an open weighted model perspective, which is more of this open source. It's not closed up. You can actually see what's going on. Everyone can connect to it and use it, and to develop this ecosystem and adoption. On the US, got big companies, very closed weighted models. No one can see what's going on. No one has access to things, and we're just trying to get. Where the U.S. is trying to win the race to AGI, even though that's largely undefined. The thing that I find interesting, and the thing that he points out in the essay, if U.S. is betting on that side of the fence, betting on having the best AI, getting to AGI the quickest, it's actually commoditizing what was previously known as its superpower. Right?
Yep.
While China's quietly focusing on building the infrastructure, or continuing to build and improve the infrastructure to build things that the world needs. And needs is a silly word here, because a lot of needs aren't like the needs we talked about Maslow's hierarchy in our last episode. We bounce all over the place, guys. We're talking about technology, we're talking about hierarchy of needs, but this is a little bit different. But it's building what the world is going to be buying over the next century, right?
Well, not just buying, but also this is about transport. It's about infrastructure. It's about transport and infrastructure, two of those big things. But I just want to call back. So why he wrote this essay, or why him, and he did, because he didn't write it on his own, did he? He wrote it with what's the other guy called?
Sam D'Amico,
Sam
I think.
D'Amico. Yeah, and
Which
it's based
he's
off like
just real quick. He's a guy that's building kind of the future of appliances with a new induction stove and applying that kind of technology. Anything that can go electric will go electric. So that's kind of what he's doing.
yeah, anything that will go electric will. Anything can go electric will go electric. And they wrote, because a few years ago he quotes Isaiah Taylor, the founder of a nuclear company called Valor Atomics, and a quote from him that, quote, "There are only three pillars to anything around us as far as consumable goods are concerned: energy, intelligence, and action." And America has put all its money in the intelligence basket. China has put all its energy into the energy and action bucket. And so now what you have is, or the end kind of goal as far as America is concerned, is that they have the intelligence, and then China makes all of the electric vehicles, the drones, the cars, the vacuum cleaners, the robots, the computers, that the intelligence will eventually be housed in. And the point of the essay is to deconstruct the electric stack with the hope that, or with the desire that, one day America can reclaim the electric stack for itself. And we'll get into whether that's just a pipe dream in any way possible, but essentially that's why he wrote the essay, to break down that kind of really fundamental difference between the Chinese and the Americans, and how the Americans can perhaps get back the power.
Question for you, Mark: which is easier to play catch up on, the kind of the infrastructure side or the intelligence side, as you've kind of delineated?
Well, having spent many hours reading this essay and thinking about the world, America are playing a game of catch up that's going to be very, very difficult to. They're not even in the same race. So if China control them, we'll get into some of the data, but it's incredible, really, how much of the electric batteries and the infrastructure around that are made in China. But China are also in the intelligence race. So America aren't, and if we're looking at current like models, in some people's eyes, they're losing that. Like the Chinese models are better to some people for some things.
Well, yeah, but better in like it only took them 6 million to train, where some of OpenAI's models and the others hundreds of millions to train, right? So yeah. The interesting thing here is like, is a just good enough model better than the best model as it relates to scaling in society and adoption and technological improvement? And
yeah, and if they're making all of the hardware, if they're getting their fingers dirty in making the hardware, that all of this is going to be put in. And as we learn again in the essay, there's so much bleed through from that into other areas of manufacturing, into other areas of thinking, into other areas of society, that by being so far ahead, at least as I see it, in the electric stack, by owning so much of the means of production, I think it gives them the advantage in the intelligence race too. So
yeah, well, let's explore and dig in.
Let's unpack it. Yeah.
What did you think about? So this wasn't in the essay specifically, but there was a link to this video by Rory Sutherland that the idea was, imagine the combustion engine came second. Imagine imagine EVs were the standard for cars. I thought it was hilarious. Like, so in a nutshell,
that sounds like a Jeremy-esque thought experiment.
I actually gave it to him, but I'm not accepting credit. No, so it's like one of those things. It's like, okay, Mark, you guys have electric cars. They're here. I've got a great idea. It's a new car. It's a little bit more complicated. We're going to put flammable liquid in it, and that flammable liquid's going to generate these small explosions in your car. It's going to need a giant gearbox with 1 million parts. It's going to need oil, a whole bunch of filters and all that. And then you ask me, is it better? And I say, well, not really. And you ask me, is it quieter? And I go, well, not really. You ask me if it's cleaner. I go, well, no, not really. And you ask me, is it easier to make? Well, no, not really. And then you ask me what the upside is. I'm like, well, it's easier to fuel, right? And that becomes like that was his one thing, but you can't fuel it from your house. You got to go to a gas station. And I just thought it was really an interesting play to be like, wow, we started with something. Imagine starting with something that was ahead of it and then trying to convince it to come back, right? So it's time to convert, right? It's time to do something different.
But everything happens for a reason, Jeremy. So I maybe that in those thought experiments, what if that had come first? It's never coming first because what we have is what we have, and it never would have been the other way around because things build on other things, and that's the way it goes. Okay, question for you just before we get into this. Another question: why? Let's say that America wins this intelligence race. Why do they think, or why does America think, or why do people think that that wins you the ultimate prize? Why is it more important to win that intelligence race than the manufacturing energy production side of the race?
Well, without having full cycle and transparency into the thought of the American collective, I think the action is the important part of it, right? I think the reason why we talk about the rules of the game in the AI race, and the rules of the game are scale at all costs, get bigger, badder, faster, more chips, more data, more chips, more data. And, we're racing to something that we haven't even fully defined yet as AGI. And is it going to be beneficial? And is it going to be out of control? And is it going to do something that's good for humanity? Or I think incremental action and incremental steps to build infrastructure that will create things that we need as a society, I think is probably going to be more impactful. And this shed a great light to me.
I just think they're playing sport with the ball that they've got left. I think that China designed it. They had their 5-year plans from however long they've had them. And they thought about this and they built it. And it ended up with, we learn about GM, the Chinese companies essentially buying up all the American companies that started out making these companies. And a big part of America just woke up 5 years ago and it's like, we don't have anything. We have to, this is all we've got now. We put all our eggs in this basket and we go forward with it. And so I think by China's, it was by design, and by American, it's okay, this is what we've got left, so let's go with it.
All right, let's try to tackle. Now that sorry, America, the dream is over. No, just kidding. Let's try to run down batteries. All right, so batteries are.
Can I start with a story?
Oh yeah, please.
Hold on.
Stories are the best.
So, batteries, lithium-ion batteries, in specifically, and they are layer number 1 in the electric stack. Hold on, let me just find.
Shouts to Elise and Chris in the chat. What's going on, guys? Good to have you here today.
Okay, here we go. The electric stack. October the 6th, 1973. On Yom Kippur, Judaism's holiest day, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Syrian President Hassan al-Assad launched a coordinated surprise attack on Israel. 11 days later, on October 17th, King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, a cautious monarch who has resisted using oil as a weapon for years, announced that OPEC would cut oil production by 5% each month until Israel withdrew from occupied territories. More dramatically, Arab oil producers declared a complete embargo on oil shipments to countries supporting Israel, primarily the United States and Netherlands. Oil prices quadrupled practically overnight from $3 to $12 per barrel. Gas stations ran dry. Americans sat in mile-long queues for hours. Perhaps you remember that, Jeremy. Sometimes fighting over fuel.
No,
President Nixon imposed a national speed limit of 55 miles an hour. Christmas was cancelled. Christmas lights were banned. And that led to Exxon and their corporate lab in New Jersey getting a 30-year-old British Oxford and Stanford graduate called Stan Whittingham,
right?
Whittingham, to research what happens if the oil runs dry. And that led him to battery research. And that was the beginning of the electric stack.
Way to tee that up. And then, yeah, so 1973, the oil gas prices go crazy, right? Everything you just said. 3 years later, on the year of my birth, 1976, Whittingham makes the first lithium ion battery. And it does something amazing. It explodes. It explodes.
Well,
It
yeah, it
explodes.
is. Yeah, it explodes.
So right.
But it was rechargeable, so it was the first kind of like, yeah, the first rechargeable lithium battery. Eventually, he'd co-share the Nobel Prize, sorry, for that with two other people. But like his exploded. So what happened?
So here comes like the standing on the shoulders of people that
Of
happen in
giants.
science. That's great, right? So basically, the physics of this is, as I understand it, is certain elements want electrons, other elements want to give those electrons up, and kind of when you put those two elements together, you have this means of electrons flowing, which is essentially what the battery is doing. So all right. So Whittingham does his thing. It's kind of cool, but it's still exploding. A guy named John Goodenough. The name is great. John
John
Goodenough.
B. John B. Good enough.
John B. Goodenough. John B.
An
Goodenough.
Oxford physicist.
Yeah, he's an Oxford
So,
guy, right? Right. So
yep.
so he gets in there and finds a way to increase the voltage, right? He does some things to improve upon what Whittingham did, but it still explodes. And then enter
Explodes less.
But it explodes. It explodes
I,
less,
I,
but it still explodes, right?
I love how you approach. You want to get into the science and the physics of this. In my notes, I've just put John B. Goodenough changed the ingredients.
Oh, perfect. It's a perfect way to think about it, right? Perfect way to think about it. All right, so there's this instability to this thing that has been invented. Enter Akira Yoshino and kind of sprinkle some magic in there, right? So he finds a way to stabilize it, right, and make it a little better. Again, step by step by step by step. Um, and then we enter,
How's your Japanese? I got like so. How's your
not
Japanese?
great, not great.
So so Dr. Akira Yoshino. So his company was called Asahi Kasei. Asahi Kasei. Now Asahi make beer, but but I don't know
Oh,
if Asahi must. We need a Japanese expert on here one day who can speak about the lexicon of vocabularies and how that applies to AI, and we can learn some Japanese. But that Asahi must mean something. But when he changed the ingredients, him, John B. Goodenough, and Stan Whittingham received the Nobel Prize. Yeah, essentially their three journeys created the lithium-ion batteries, and in this essay, we get the first reference of what's called an alpha product as a result of this. So Akira Yoshino, he sells the patent to Sony, and the lithium ion battery was put inside the Sony Handycam, which I remember those Sony Handycam ads. You must remember them. So, and that was the first alpha product, wasn't it, of the lithium ion rechargeable battery that now you could film your
your
family.
Christmases and yeah,
Yeah.
which I remember
Um,
we'd always set it up and just yeah. I mean that's a big part of growing up for us. But
but do you
that was
remember the big cameras before it, and like the handy cam became this much smaller than those ones, so you could hold it in one hand, and that not the miniaturization because it didn't become miniature, but that reduction in size that now you just see across the world in every consumer product was one of the first that I remember.
so. What do you think about this idea? This quote was great, or this philosophy is a really interesting idea. Lateral thinking with withered technology.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
It's kind of cool. Like came from so basically it's like Sony didn't really invent anything new, right? With this, they took this existing quote withered technology, which again, what they developed was pretty powerful, but again, we haven't. It was the idea that needed the energy and the action, right? Idea and the energy and action. So Sony applied the energy and action, becomes a product, the Handycam, and now suddenly this insatiable demand for people to need hours of battery life to capture all the moments, in their family. Demand explodes, right? So again, we have this idea of Western research turning into Japanese products. So it's a theme that we'll see kind of throughout this.
And that we all remember those Japanese products, Panasonic, Sony, and that in technological might has shifted over, because in this essay he kind of puts Japan in the same bucket as America and Europe, doesn't he? And it's not Japan and China, it's really Japan, America, and Europe, and China doing this other stuff. And those big Japanese companies that really changed the game of consumer products, that's now being done in China rather than Japan.
So also, yeah.
Also go.
Oh, I was just saying. So just a reminder, guys, we're literally learning in public. We're not battery experts. We're not physics experts. So if you have ideas or things we haven't considered yet, please pop them in the chat. We'd love to engage and learn more together. So let's go from handy cam to the next step in the evolution of batteries.
Somebody we know. Is there not a name here? Something coming up? Somebody got involved. Somebody started putting handycam batteries in a car.
Yeah, yeah. Who's that guy? Let's talk through it.
I don't know. Who is that guy? What is that car company? So you had the rechargeable lithium-ion battery. It was in the handycam, and Tesla put them in a car. But the problem was obviously that they didn't really work, did they? Not to the level that they wanted. And that caused Tesla to make it better. And we're not battery experts, so I'm not going to go into the battery. If you read the essay, he goes a lot into the technicalities of the battery. But essentially they go from Well, you explain it, Joe.
They go from this, bunch of single batteries trying to figure out the power thing all together to a bunch of batteries together in a pack and tying the batteries into like a collective versus a bunch of, tiny cells working independently, right? So what happened is it was a bonding thing. I think it was a wire bonding thing that connected the batteries to make them work better, because what happened prior to, if one cell failed, kind of everything else, wetted the bed. But they applied this wire bonding, and now the batteries could work better together, and we're starting to see some improvement in the application of the car, right? So they sometimes still explode though.
And so
our friend comes back.
Sonic. Yeah, we will.
Well, we have another friend come back. Doesn't Good Enough come back at nearly the age of John B. Good Enough comes back at nearly the age of 90, and continues to do some tweaks into the battery type. And we're not going to, the essay, like you said, the essay does a great job of talking through the different battery technologies, but he tweaked the chemistry a little bit to for what's called LFP, lithium ion phosphate, and kind of reduced some of those explosions, steady discharge, a little safer, lower energy density, but and the low, I think it was a lower energy density, and the conductivity was a little bit less than what they wanted, but those were acceptable because the use was working good enough. It was working John B. good enough.
Hold on, let me just so just read a bit of this out. So
please.
Tiny cells were fine for laptops and camcorders, but if you ran thousands of cells in series, your battery pack would be so high voltage that you couldn't use semiconductors in any of the power electronics. It would be above their rated voltages. So Tesla had to wire cells in parallel to make them behave collectively like a larger cell, which presented a huge problem. If a battery cell failed and short-circuited, all of the other cells in the pack would drain through the failed cell, causing the pack to die and possibly setting the whole vehicle on fire in the process. Then he gives some stats on the actual failure rate. So if 1 in 2,000 cells are bad, which in 2005 it was, you were looking at a 3.3% failure rate per vehicle. So 81 roads, 81 cars of every 2,500 were just breaking, exploding, whatever. So Tesla had to learn to live with individual cells failing without lighting the car on fire. So to do that, that meant fusing every single cell in the battery pack. But the way that laptop batteries were assembled, you would have strips of metal spot welded to the cell directly, not exactly the sort of joint that would work as a fuse. In a laptop, this was okay. This is where they pulled technology from an adjacent space, power electronics. Tesla used wire bonding to connect each cell to a big plate with a thin wire. If the cell failed, the wire would be under extremely high current and act like a fuse, disconnecting the cell. Okay, yeah.
All right, moving right along. Let's get back to the storyline. All right.
Yep.
So the next little beat on this story is another example of China kind of playing the long game a little bit. Energy in action. There was an American or U.S. company, I think A123 was U.S. right? U.S.
Yep.
battery company.
Went bankrupt.
That went bankrupt. Again, had solid tech, good patents. China buys it for real cheap and kind of brings the IP home. And there was a really interesting inflection point, I think, when there's a company called BYD in China that is this battery maker. What was the event? Was it the Olympics? I think it was the Olympics, and they started deploying these big batteries on buses, right? So they essentially used the Olympics as a way to test battery powered buses. I thought that was really interesting. And with a bus, there's some forgiveness because it's huge. So the form factor doesn't have to be really small. And you basically favor a safe environment versus range, right? Buses don't have to go 8 million miles. They're usually kind of spinning in a nice little loop around the city, right? So I thought that was a really interesting way to test the technology and also probably get paid or have some government help as it's building infrastructure for the Olympics. So
didn't China pretty much fund that whole bus scheme?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
BYD. Do you know what BYD? Build your dreams.
Bring your own device as well. No. So he's got these rolling battery labs, right, that they're using to test and prove this technology. The owner of BYD, I thought it was really interesting. Wang, I'm gonna butcher this. Xuanfu. Warren Buffett called him Edison plus Jack Welch. Thought that was a pretty powerful statement.
It's a big compliment.
It is a big compliment. So then there's a chemistry war, right? There are people betting on different types of batteries for different reasons. We're not going to go into all the technical pieces of that puzzle. Again, read the essay if you want to dig in to more of that. But we're talking about, NMCs versus LFPs and, who made the bet on the right chemistry. Some say BYD did. Some say who's the other company that ended up being CATL, I think, was the other company.
Cattle, yeah.
Yeah. Is that cattle, huh?
It's all, the timing of all this is so serendipitous as well. And we spoke about that at the beginning with your thought experiment. If the Olympics hadn't been in Beijing, then the Chinese government wouldn't have been perhaps so ready to spend all the money on the batteries for the buses. That coincided. It was just a perfect timing for the technology for the 5-year plan of China. It was just amazing timing. And China just got good at batteries, like really, really good at making batteries cheaply and efficiently. And what they did, I don't know if they flashed their eyes at Germany, but it ended up with BMW.
Yeah, there was a quote by Mr. BMW, I guess, or whatever that was in there. It was like, okay.
I love his honesty was so good.
Yeah, what did he say? Do you have it pulled up somewhere?
I'll find it, but what he just said,
it was basically like, how do we get 3 million batteries in 2 years or something crazy like that? So he was like he had the aha moment, I guess, right?
And a businessman, and he realized, okay, yeah, they've got better batteries. How do we get some for because we got to make some electric cars.
So the
Why
the
did
two
BM,
oh,
let me just find that quote.
while you're looking for that, that's just the current state according to Packy's numbers. BYD makes 17.8% of the world's batteries. CATL or cattle, I'm not sure how you say that one, is 37.9% of the world's batteries, all totaled up to 55, nearly 56% of global battery production. So domination.
Complete domination. And your quote was right, by the way. You just missed out the F word, but that's exactly what he said.
Got to leave that out for.
So,
well, last little thought on the battery as we kind of come to the close of the battery story a bit. And again, the depth in Packy's breakdown is tremendous. If you have time, I encourage you to read it. The International Energy Agency had an interesting quote in here. I just mentioned the numbers, 56% of global battery production. So even if all of the U.S. projects that actually come to bear that are in the pipeline today related to battery production, the IEA, International Energy Agency, said the U.S. isn't likely to win more than 15% market share, even if all of those projects come to bear. And we all know every idea that turns into a company doesn't last very long, right?
yeah, and it's so hard to see anything changing. So Panasonic are part of the Tesla Gigafactory making the batteries. Then BMW, so what's left of the European car manufacturing industry, is using Chinese-made batteries in their cars. In 2020, BYD introduced the Blade battery. So essentially, anyone who's driven a Tesla will see those, which now are in Teslas. They're using Blade batteries from BYD. Is anybody in America willingly building anything in the electric stack on the battery part of it?
I think, well, it sounds like there's some projects in the works. I would actually, it would have been cool to look at that list from that agency that, is kind of assessing the potential of some of that happening. But I think it's one of those things that, I don't know, maybe it's a look of like, man, they're already, it's like being down 20 to 2 in a soccer match. And you're just kind of like knowing that 20 goals in a soccer match is ridiculous. And, you're in the locker room at halftime with all your battery manufacturers, and you're like, all right, guys, we can catch up. But, all the players are like, man, that still seems pretty far. It seems like a big gap to jump. But who knows?
I've got a question for you on batteries.
Uh-oh.
Do you care where your battery's from?
Not really.
Does anybody care? I mean, we spoke about this yesterday. I mean, people want a car that doesn't break down. People want a drone that stays in the air. People want some people want an electric vacuum cleaner that doesn't just break when it's dust in the hallway. They don't. Most people, regardless of what the political media narrative might be about buying your own, don't really care. And I think that
do we even think of like batteries in this thing? Like, I mean,
well, yeah,
it just works. It just works. We just want it to work, right?
And I don't see a will on the battery side of it to fight back. And like you said, I think your footballing analogy was great. So we should probably move on to part 2 of the electric stack.
Man, do you think we can get through magnets? Let me set the stage, guys. Let me set the stage. We've been waiting 162 years for magnets to get really good. It starts with a gentleman named Michael Faraday, 1821, builds the first electric motor. It was pretty cool, pretty revolutionary, but from a magnet perspective, kind of meh, right? So over the next 162 years, magnets have been getting better. Alnico magnets, came out in 1955. They're in your, if you have a Gibson, they're in your humbuckers, Mark. They're in your humbucker pickups.
They're in my humbuckers on my Gretsch.
Oh, you got the Gretsch. There you go. So basically in 1955, they're
it's magnets all the way down.
Magnets all the way down. So 100 times better than Faraday in 1955, right? Then in 1983 was an interesting year. So you have two scientists. You have one in Japan, one in General Motors, and like so many things in history, a simultaneous innovation happens without the other knowing. So this,
because there's an order to it, Jeremy. The way things happen is the way things happen.
Oh, man. All right. So the Sadie and the one, are we going back to Federico Fajan, dare I say?
Wow.
So, okay.
Laughed out of town.
So they, right. So they discover simultaneously a compound that's 360 times stronger than Faraday's original motor, the magnet, right? So this is the breakthrough that makes the electric motor possible, right?
Are you talking about the neodymium magnet?
Teasing into that, right? So that thing stepped in with a bunch of different innovations too, but just general casting, over the last 162 years, there's been innovations in magnets. But what we have, like magnets are kind of the muscle, right? Of the electric stack, the way I see it, right? So batteries are kind of the heart, magnets are kind of the muscle, and then power electronics, which we'll get into in the future, is kind of this central nervous system, is how it's kind of worded in here. But did you know how motors worked down to the nitty gritty? I'm gonna be honest. Electric motors.
I had a vague notion of the role that the magnets played in spinning the wheel, but this paper goes into a lot more detail. So I would say my knowledge of it started out at about 5% and ended up at about 45%.
Okay. So let's talk about these two guys. Masato Sagawa in Sumitomo, Japan, right? On one side. And John Croat from General Motors. They all converge where? In Pittsburgh, I think?
Pittsburgh at the annual battery conference, or the annual magnet conference, which is a conference, if it's still going, we should probably go to. Yes.
So, all right. So let's talk about Sagawa's idea or his process, right? He uses this sintering method of creating this magnet, right? So you're mixing powders, press them under high pressure, and then you heat them until they kind of come together. And the magnetic strength was pretty good in what he pulled together. And then Croat has another method, that's the metal spinning method. Okay, so this is a little bit different. You still kind of melt some stuff down, but you spray what's melted onto a copper wheel. It cools pretty quick into crystals. Then you grind the ribbons, right? And you mix it with a resin, and it almost kind of looks like plastic, right? But the results are a little bit different. I think Sagawa's magnets are stronger, right? But this injection molding idea is a bit easier to produce, right?
Yeah,
so you've got these.
They're more efficient and cheaper.
Right. So here's an interesting piece of the puzzle. So they actually kind of end up working together in a weird way. Don't they cross-license some of what they've figured out to each other? I think I read that somewhere.
Well, you get the alpha product first, don't you? The 3.5-inch hard disk drive is like the alpha product of the magnet.
The magnets, so similar to the Handycam.
The Handycam is for the batteries. This is for the magnets. And when they start working together? I just find it.
Yeah, but again, the alpha product is this hard drive, and there was an innovation in, one was like a 5.5-inch, and kind of the newer one was like the 3.5 inch, right? But it was kind of like, hey, the 5.5 inch is great. Like we're good. We don't need anything bigger, badder, and better. But what led them, Mark, to find that 3.5 inch one being a little bit better? What was the inflection point? Do you remember?
Remind me.
What is it? Finis Connor, the guy that started Seagate. So in 1985, the inflection point was as these bigger personal computers were kind of getting down in smaller form factor, compact. He lands the deal to put his hard drives into compact portable computers. I think this number's crazy to me, but in the late 80s, he had 1.3 billion in sales. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, 1.37 billion in revenue,
Or
making
in
it the
rev? Yeah,
fastest
yeah, yeah.
growing
In the
manufacturing
80s.
startup in United States history.
So
And
that's only
that's
possible because of this neodymium magnet. So let's unpack that a little bit. What is that? Give me your understanding of neodymium.
neodymium. Yeah, I couldn't do batteries. You want to do magnets. For me, what was important was that how quickly that the technology, because it was they'd made 1.3 billion. Obviously, there's hundreds and thousands of these compact computers, and the technology just became much cheaper, much easier to improve upon and iterate upon, and then it was started to use in other products. Which is so you get these curves. He talks about the actual essay is called the electric slide, and essentially shows the curves of all of these parts of the electric stack from their 1990 price, which was up here, down to their today's price, and they all follow this same trajectory from high up in the top left of the graph to low down in the bottom right of the graph. And these alpha products, this inflection point you speak of, causes this mass influx of investment and research to make in this case, the magnet cheaper and more readily accessible. So what it does for me, rather than how. I'm not about to explain how magnets work. You go for it.
No, I'd probably get into trouble pretty quickly, but just the idea of this, the rare earth addition to this, neodymium boron has the highest BH max in the world, which is how you measure the strength of, or a means to measure the strength of magnets. So yeah, so these additions to this chemical equation kind of got things pretty interesting. And again, we're in another conference. We're in the steel magnet conference, right? The killer use case is the 3.5 inch hard drive that we just talked about getting into
Also,
compact computers.
but it's all about China. So I didn't know drones. So these neodymium magnets make drones possible. Without them, there would be no drones. Humanoids are going to be reliant completely. So since our guest said there's going to be like 5 billion humanoids in the next 10 years, that's a lot of magnets. And complete domination by China. Rare earths. So China, quote, mines roughly 70% of global rare earth, processes 85 to 90% of them, and produces 90% plus of the world's neodymium magnets. China makes at least 50% of the world's electric motors.
So backing out as a comparison to the battery thing, because we've heard this story before. There's definitely a theme in this. So A123, American innovation, gets sold for pennies on the dollar to the Chinese with the IP, and they innovate and they do great things with that technology. So we have Croat and GM and MagnaQuench. What a name, MagnaQuench.
MagnaQuench.
And MagnaQuench is building building magnets and motors for, defense market, for cars, all of that stuff, right? And there were some investment decisions, I think, that GM made, and this is not a case study on GM, in the 80s, or 80s and 90s, but there was a point while MagnaQuench was doing its thing, making batteries for GM cars, Department of Defense. GM starts buying a bunch of things, not little companies, but like gigantic companies like EDS, Ross Perot's company, Hughes Motors. They decide to launch GMAC mortgage financing, right? They invest $90 million in an automated factory. And then the you know what hits the fan, right? The Christmas massacre, I think is what they called it, when GM basically had to lay off 74,000 workers. They closed 21 plants, and they had They had an $8.5 billion loss in their North American automotive group in 1991. So it's a fire sale. We got to get back to what we do best. We build cars. We don't care about anything else. So allegedly, I don't know that there wasn't any data to back this up, but when GM was looking to offload everything, MagnaQuench was one of those things on the docket. China was pretty interested in MagnaQuench. GM needed somewhere else to sell their cars. They needed relationships. Potentially, the MagnaQuench deal was in part to get access to the Chinese market to sell cars. Little did they know the trade-off was massive related to magnets.
I want to go into the magnet data. So at the beginning, I joked that it's magnets all the way down. It is. So obviously we have drones. There's a sentence in the essay which I think should make some people sit up and pay attention. And thanks to the war in Ukraine, drones are widely recognized as a key piece of the military arsenal of the future. They're only possible because of neomagnets. 90% of the world's magnets, the neomagnets, are made in China. So, yeah, okay, we don't need to go into the military thing, but, you know, the future wars are going to be drone wars, and they're going to need magnets, and all the magnets are made in China. Then there are the robots. Humanoids use actuators like humans use joints. Tesla's Optimus robot uses a total of 40 electromechanical actuators, 28 structural, and then some others for the arm and leg. All of them use neomagnets. He calls it here Neo-China. The story of the research, development, and commercialization of neomagnets, like the story of the research, development, and commercialization of lithium-ion batteries, is an American and Japanese story. And like the lithium-ion battery story, modern scale and production dominance of neomagnets now belongs to China.
So
humanoids, robots, drones, cars, phones. What else is there?
These are the ingredients that build the future of the world when you think about it. Batteries and magnets, right? And the control is significantly with China related to energy in action. They've figured out ways to take an idea, scale it, and make it work really, really well. The US did have a company called Mountain Pass that was focused on magnets. It failed, kind of respun up, failed again, and then it became what's called MP Materials, which is from a US perspective is getting a lot of attention now, but still is kind of pale in comparison of what China is able to do there. So my question for you, Mark, as we land the plane, because I know we need to land the plane on this, and we'll hit the other two in next week. We'll hit kind of the semiconductor piece. We'll hit power electronics and all that fun stuff. My question for you is, what would happen to the U.S. economy if China said, F you, and stop selling neomags?
Well, that's the political hot potato. I mean, the public one is rare earths, but it's all connected, isn't it? You go back to the primary ingredients and the rare earth. It's why America was dancing around invading Greenland, wasn't it? Finding elsewhere. Australia's got some rare earths, hasn't it? Do they get drawn into this? I'm sure there's some countries in Africa that have rare earths, so I assume the sourcing of the rare earth changes, and you get into a massive trade war and try to battle China with some of the things that America did, NVIDIA chips, as we've seen. But such is their manufacturing might that whatever you stop the flow of, they will simply create a probably soon better version than what the America does. So get your politics in order.
Get your politics in order. That's a shirt, man. Holy cow. Yeah.
There's a documentary on Netflix I saw a while ago called The American Factory. And watch that documentary and you will see why America will never, ever in our lifetimes win this race. It's called The American Factory, and it is so eye-opening to how manufacturing is different in China to is in America. And of course, I'm sure there are exceptions to the rule, and there's some incredible American manufacturing companies who do things absolutely off the chain well. But as a general cultural norm, how can you catch up when you're so far behind?
It's a big question. That's a big question.
My final question for you and the listeners to think on is the question we started at the beginning is, if America focused everything on the intelligence part of this, so that in however many years it is, all of these machines that are made in China with an American brain, or do we end up with made in China with a Chinese brain?
Or some various degrees of both. I think the future is too important to...
That's a t-shirt. The future is too important.
The future is too important for... This is going to be a hot take, but the future is too important for nation states, I think. The future is too important for nation states. The future is too important for me versus you. The future is too important for what I can keep you from doing and what you can keep me from doing. We talked about the coordination problem. Technology has tremendous potential to solve the coordination problem if humans can get their you-know-what together. But there you have it.
Yeah, global. If there is no global coordination, it doesn't matter what technology we're speaking about. It can be AI, it can be batteries, it can be electric kites. It doesn't matter if there's no global communication, if there's no global accord, if there's no global consensus on what's best for humanity, then yes, there is no solution. And you're right, the future is too important. So sort your politics out.
Sort your politics out. Well, this was fun, Mark. Hope you guys have enjoyed it as well. We'll have a part 2 to figure out the other 2 pieces of the stack. But I guarantee a little teaser, you're going to see some similar patterns as we move through the stack. That's all I've got for today, Mark. Any closing thoughts?
I'm going to see if I can test drive a Tesla Model 3 before next week's show, because it's all about the Model 3.
Fair enough. Hey, stay curious.
Be disruptive.
Keep thinking on paper and learning in public.